I literally can't. Like, I literally can't. We were just at the headquarters of the New York War Crimes yesterday protesting because this outlet can't stop, won't stop doing non-stop genocide propaganda for the Israeli regime. And then they come out with an article smearing Anas Al-Sharif. What to know about the Al Jazeera broadcaster targeted by Israel that claims it gives voice to terrorists? The outlet denies that. You guys notice the way their framing is insane? Like, their framing! They'll be like, the Israeli military said on Sunday that they targeted this Al Jazeera journalist in a strike, accusing him of being a Hamas operative. Do you guys understand how fucking sick it is that they keep doing this? There is less than zero evidence that he had any affiliations with Hamas. And despite the fact that these people are supposed to be journalists, they constantly start out their pieces with, the Israeli military said, I just want you to ask yourself this question, okay? If you're a reader. Have you ever seen the New York Times start out a piece about Russia, China, or North Korea with Kim Jong-un says, Putin says, the Chinese government says, no. They're always like, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, you can't trust anything he says. The Chinese Communist Party. But then when it comes to the Israeli regime, which literally gets caught lying constantly, the literally constant fucking lies 24/7, they're like, well, the Israeli military says. I can't handle it. If you're not already following Squirrel on Twitter, you need to, because Squirrel often will break down the associations that these so-called journalists have with the regime. The author of the latest smear campaign of this journalist is somebody named Efrat Levine, is an Israeli street artist who became one of the main New York Times reporters, who in her reporting cites the Washington Institute of Near East Policy as her expert to repeat the lie that Al Jazeera is Hamas. YNAP is the main Israel lobby propaganda outfit in the U.S., and the New York Times systematically sources its genocide laundering propaganda to them via their Israeli IDF Mossad assets like Ronen Bergman, Adam Razgon, and Efrat Levine. Somebody explain to me why this person who is affiliated with IOF and Israeli think tanks is writing pieces about Gaza journalists. No, you guys, the New York Times is Israeli propaganda. As Omar El Ayat points out, every week I think that we've hit rock bottom, but each week, new lows by the New York Times, incitement to murder as editorial policy. If you have not canceled your New York Times subscription yet, please do. The way that they report already on Palestinians is grotesque, which should not be surprising once you learn all the affiliations that they have to the Israeli regime and Mossad. But the fact that they continue to smear journalists as they claim to be a news organization and journalists themselves is unforgivable. Do you understand how dangerous it is for so-called journalists and major outlets in the West continuing to push this propaganda lie that not only puts the remaining journalists in Gaza's life in danger, but that has helped manufacture consent for the murder of over 230 of them since the start of this? I heard this clip from Jeremy Scahill, who is a journalist at Dropsite News. If you're not following Dropsite News, please do follow Jeremy Scahill. They're doing incredibly important reporting. This is what he had to say about outlets like the New York War Crimes and their complicity in getting other journalists killed.
You are part of the murder of your colleagues if you stood silent, or if you in any way gave justification to the dehumanization propaganda agenda that leads to the murder of some of the greatest journalistic heroes in modern history. To dignify Israel's claims about these journalists is so reprehensible and disgusting that it makes the New York Times a party to establishing the conditions, both before and after the fact, that lead to our Palestinian colleagues being murdered. I mean, this is what it is. They are murdering in record numbers journalists in the context of a mass murder campaign embedded within a genocide that is shredding children every day, that is setting tents on fire every day, that is intentionally starving people every day, that is engaged in a totally fake so-called aid distribution that also includes dropping massive heavy boxes from the sky that are crushing Palestinians. And all of this began with the lie factory that was set into production before October 7th, but then put onto an industrial scale after October 7th. Beheaded babies, total lie. Mass total lie. Constant dehumanization of Palestinians, constant lying about what happened on October 7th. And then the news organizations and the prominent journalists fall into two basic categories. Either they're totally silent and say nothing, or they're part of the problem.
This is exactly right. what he is saying. And most of the journalists in the West, with the exception of maybe a handful, I could probably count them on both hands, have contributed to this. It is why I have made such a big deal, and other people who actually care about the truth have made such a big deal about their October 7th atrocity propaganda. The reason why it matters to debunk it is because of exactly what Jeremy Scahill just said. They have used it to justify the genocide. They have used it to justify the murder of journalists. And they're using it again today. Today, Ryan Grimm, who's also a drop side, he used to be a journalist at The Intercept, reported on this happening. Complete capitulation by the UN today. The backstory. Israel accused Hamas of using SA as a weapon of war, demanding that they be blacklisted, an official designation with diplomatic consequences. The UN asked to investigate. Hamas agreed. Israel refused. Israel instead invited Pramila Patten with no investigative mandate to visit and write a report, so she did. Israel then produced its own report through Patten's friend and her former colleague, Kedar Ruth, by the Dina Project. That's a reference to the story of Dinah in the Old Testament. Dinah is a victim of SA, and her brothers respond by killing everyone in the town. The title made clear the purpose of the allegation was to launch a genocide. 5. Major reports emerge with video evidence of the systemic SA of Palestinians in Israeli prisons and detention centers. 6. The UN announces it is blacklisting Hamas per Israel's demand, but does not blacklist Israel, merely warning them to do better. And this is the key part that he gets to. In about 2 decades, if the UN even still exists, they'll apologize when it no longer matters. As a journalist, this is the most disturbing storyline I have ever covered. An endless stream of fabrications launched as a part of a clear diplomatic and media strategy aimed at justifying genocide, done with the complicity of many Western outlets that toss aside any semblance of journalistic rigor, and then the successful bullying of the UN even after Israel killed hundreds of UN staff and their families. It worked partly because nobody wants to be called a denier or a apologist, even if the charge is absurd. But how does it feel to be complicit in genocide? The people that are willing to talk about this are getting smeared 10 ways to fucking Sunday, and they have been in exactly the same ways that Ryan is pointing out here. But there will come a time when the truth comes out. And will the UN apologize? Will they still exist? Who knows? Honestly, I don't give a fuck if the UN dissolves, because they're a joke. They're a joke. Everything the UN was established to help be there for, they have failed. I pray to God that there are war crimes tribunals after this ends. And when it happens, that all of the so-called journalists and outlets like the New York War Crimes and the UN are fucking tried. There must be accountability for this, or else we have no civilization. I'm so fucking serious. If there is not accountability for this shit, we have no fucking civilization left. If you have not already gone to the website, the NewYorkWarCrimes.com, and looked through their dossier and looked through some of their archives, please do so. Also follow them on Twitter, because they are doing very good work in their own accountability archives of the monsters that have been laundering this genocide through the paper of record.
I woke up this morning to the horrific news that Anas Al-Sharif, the Al Jazeera journalist, and 3 of his colleagues were killed in a targeted Israeli strike inside Gaza. This brings the total number of journalists killed in Gaza since October 7th to 176, which is frankly a mind-boggling statistic. And I just wanted to say, and I know that helps nobody, but I speak for a lot of Western journalists when I say that so many of us feel angry and outraged and powerless and ashamed. We are confronted with a stream of accusations from the IDF that seek to dehumanize our Palestinian colleagues, that seek to justify their killings, and the nature of the carefully calibrated language that we are using in our story, I understand to many just feels so detached and so not proportional to the agony and outrage of the moment. And behind the scenes, many of us continue to push and press and sign letters and write petitions and do meetings, and none of it seems to make a damn bit of difference. So just a reminder that journalism is not a crime, and that the targeting of journalists is a war crime.
Like, okay, on the one hand, I'm glad that she said something, considering how many Western journalists haven't said anything, but the bar is in hell. And I have a serious problem with a lot of what she said there, okay? First of all, it was 5 of his colleagues. Second of all, it's been well over 230, okay? That's where we are right now, that we know of, 230. I don't know where this 170 something is coming from. Also, what's with her bullshit excusing their insane framing that they always do in our media? where every time they talk about Palestinians being killed, it's in the passive voice and it never identifies Israel as the ones doing it. But then when they're talking about Israelis, they use very emotionally charged language. Oftentimes when they're talking about Palestinians, they'll be like, Palestinian, checked out of life in a clash. Like, who killed them, bro? Can Clarissa Ward explain why she understands why they do that? Because it's certainly not for journalistic purposes. No, they write like that in every single outlet for the purpose of sanitizing what the Israeli regime is doing to them. She's like, a lot of my Western colleagues are outraged. Are you? Because you guys got a funny way of showing it. I like how she's like, we're talking about it. We continue to press them behind the scenes. What do you mean behind the scenes? You're a journalist. Your whole job is to face the public. And her saying they're powerless was actually infuriating because you're not powerless. You guys have the power of your pen, the power of your laptop, the power of your camera, the power of your reporting. It is quite literally your job and your obligation as the press to be front facing and to tell people what is really happening. Ain't nobody interested in well, behind the scenes we were like talking about what? The whole job of the fucking press is supposed to be to tell the world what is happening behind the scenes, what is happening in the world. And the fact that you guys have been silent is so atrocious. Is there how lawyers can lose their law licenses? Can you lose your journalist license? They should all lose their fucking journalist licenses. And at best, they've been silent, you guys. At best, they've been silent. At worst, they have participated in laundering the genocide. They have participated in smearing the Palestinian journalists. Do you understand why the press wear these blue press vests during genocides, wars, conflicts? They are meant to identify them as neutral observers and protect them in conflicts and dangerous environments. But in Gaza, instead of the press vest serving as an identifier to protect them, the Israeli regime, it is served as a target, a kill target for the IOS. Shame! No, you guys had an obligation to stand up for your international colleagues, and by and large, you have failed.